coronavirus microbe plushies that were given away to all of the participants. Oh, isn't that so cute? They had little coronavirus plushies that they got to take home with them as a little souvenir, a little memento of the dawning of the new age of coronavirus-led microbial terror. But don't worry, the good folks at PolitiFact have come along and deemed it mostly false that Event 201 gave out stuffed souvenir coronavirus toys, because as they go on to note, well, yes, they did actually give out stuffed toys that really are meant to be coronavirus microbes, but context is everything, and they weren't actually predicting the novel coronavirus that they were talking about simulating in that simulation. Again, all of these fact checkers are parodies of themselves, but this is the framework that has been decided upon for censoring information on the internet from here on forward. So if you're hearing my voice, consider yourself lucky that you have found it at all, and who knows how long this type of message will be allowed to be spread on the internet via any sort of major platform. But as I say, Event 201, October 2019 really was the marking of the new era that we have stumbled into one way or another, and that era is now coming to fruition, and there are many different aspects of what's going on right now, and the very many different power grabs that are being taken by authoritarian structures all around the world. Just as after 9/11, every authoritarian in the world was happy to see that event occur, in the sense that it gave them carte blanche to call all of their enemies terrorists and launch a war upon them. Well, now authoritarian structures around the world are benefiting from the massive power grab that is taking place right under our nose, and there are many different aspects to this, including the incredible steps that have just taken place just in the past few hours. As I'm recording this podcast, Trump taps emergency powers as virus relief plan proceeds, in which we are learning that a 70-year-old wartime piece of legislation known as the Defense Production Act is being put into place to essentially nationalize certain industries and services at the behest of the government to create medical relief supplies. Well, isn't this great? We can nationalize industry and make sure that it all works and functions in the way that we need in order to save lives, of course. That's what it's always about. Well, we will get more into the economic and other aspects of what's going on in future editions of this podcast, but today we're focusing specifically on the invocation of martial law and martial law type powers on the back of what is happening right now. And you don't have to go very far to see that that is exactly what is happening, even as I speak.
Now, the epicenter of this outbreak, the city of Wuhan, has just handed over the first of 2 temporary hospitals to the Chinese military medical teams.
In response to the worsening situation and ahead of an anticipated nationwide curfew, the IDF entered its highest state of alert, which practically means the Israeli military's emergency preparedness for war.
The president of the region of Lombardy has said that he wants the military to be called in to enforce the lockdown, calling on people to stay at home. This is really the mantra that they're leading out to the public at large.
This morning, emergency measures in New York. The state's governor deploying the National Guard to New Rochelle, a suburb of New York City, in an effort to contain a coronavirus outbreak there. Residents within a 1-mile radius required to stay within the area for a 2-week period.
It is a dramatic action, but it is the largest cluster in the country, and this is literally a matter of life and death.
Anybody can look at a map, and basically New Rochelle is a point where if you have the military, you can deploy them within 15 miles of each choke point. And then the city and Long Island are both landlocked.
I am faced with the podcaster's dilemma of sitting here in March 2020 in the midst of an ongoing and unfolding story, the end of which I obviously do not know and cannot present to you. I can only present to you the slices of information that I have at my disposal as I'm recording this, which will undoubtedly already be out of date by the time you're listening to this, even if you listen to it as soon as I release it, let alone days, weeks, months, or years after the fact. So I can only give you a slice of the information that is at hand right now, but I can tell you that martial law and the specter of martial law is very much in the air in the United States and elsewhere, reflected in any number of stories that are trending on the news pages right now, the mainstream news pages, about what is martial law and is martial law coming to America. For example, we can get this from Fox Business. What is martial law? Increase in COVID-19 related rules, curfews has led to circulation of rumors surrounding martial law, and it helpfully defines martial law as a term that describes the government order of replacing civil rule with the military in a time of war or emergency. And in the US, it notes the president must order for the establishment of martial law, which would in turn transfer power into the hands of the army. But the change in power must only last through the duration of the emergency, according to Cornell Law School's Legal Information Institute. Well, actually, for people who have been paying attention over the past 18 years, the national emergency that was declared on 9/11 has been renewed every single year by every single president since then. So there is a state of emergency, which some researchers, like Peter Dale Scott, who knows what he's talking about, has said essentially the Constitution has been null and void since that point. There has been a martial law scenario in place in the United States that has been operating. But that sounds like conspiracy theory. If that was the case, surely we would know about it, wouldn't we? Oh, would we? So exactly what has and has not the president declared? What exactly is his authority in a situation of emergency anyway? Actually, that's classified. And don't look to conspiracy theorist James Corbett for that take. Look to CNN, where Zachary Wolf just reported in the last 24 hours, what's the full extent of Trump's disaster authority? That's classified, security expert says. And this article cites Elizabeth Goyton, the co-director of the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center for Justice at New York University, who notes that there is no single law giving the federal government authority to lock down the entire country, but there are secret documents that have never been publicly released giving the president emergency powers. So the emergence into the public consciousness of the fact that there are secret orders that Americans are going to be subject to, and presumably already are, although we don't really know, because again, you're not allowed to know even what powers exist, let alone whether or not they've been enacted. So take the public declaration of this is martial law for what it's worth, which is not very much, because there does not need to be such a public declaration when all of these secret classified powers are already at work behind the scenes. Here's something that we can see on the surface is, for example, militarytimes.com reporting on here's the latest National Guard mobilizations by state, talking about how governments across 23 states have mobilized components of the Army and Air National Guard to assist in their state's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including drawing up over 2,000 guardsmen to active duty status. But for a more in-depth look at what is coming, we can look to articles like this one, Coronavirus versus Constitution, What Can Government Stop You From Doing in a Pandemic? And although this is obviously from the Sacramento Bee, it is not a thoroughgoing exploration of the years of considered legislative framework and pandemic response plans and drills and secret documents that we've been going through today, let alone in episode 86 of this podcast, but it does give you some sense of what's going on right now. It says public closures, a ban on gatherings, quarantine notices, and orders for isolation have become increasingly common as the coronavirus continues to spread across the United States. Officials in Washington State and San Francisco are limiting the number of people allowed to attend public gatherings. Again, this is already outdated information. The governor of California joined them on Thursday, urging the cancellation of all events with more than 250 people in attendance. Oh, what a difference a week makes. But if it seems these actions are infringing on individual freedoms guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, think again. And it says, you don't have a right to assemble against the backdrop of known public health risk, James G. Hodge told McClatchy News. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Oh, there's a public health risk that's been declared by authorities. All right, all that's off the table. Everything's scrapped. That's what this country was founded on. That's what we fought and died for, was some president come along and declare an emergency, and everything is off the table. And please note that whatever takes place in the coming weeks, This is the precedent that will be used in the future. And even if you agree 100% with what is happening right now, that there is a real known public health risk that is threatening people and threatening lives, so it is absolutely necessary for the government to invoke these powers and take all your privileges and rights away, well, that will happen again and again and again. And imagine, just imagine, if some duplicitous leader somehow or other got in some position of authority and used this pandemic panic button or any other button in the emergency button room to invoke these powers for their own political gain or purposes. Could that ever happen? Oh, not in the United States. More pieces on this puzzle that we can put together at this point. For example, Politico last week reporting on how America's national security machine stares down a viral threat, noting how the National Security Council is coordinating the White House's response to this pandemic, has been in charge of it since mid-January. They are coordinating with the intelligence agencies and presumably with the military as well on emergency plans for what is coming. And we also get this glimpse just in the last couple of days from SeattleTimes.com in an article that was, again, immediately scrubbed by Facebook as part of their bug, which is having a little problem censoring the right misinformation in this coronavirus infodemic. But this article, U.S. government tech industry discussing ways to harness location data to combat coronavirus. The U.S. government is in active talks with Facebook, Google, and a wide array of tech companies and health experts about how they can use location data gleaned from Americans' phones to combat the novel coronavirus, including tracking whether people are keeping one another at safe distances to stem the outbreak. That's right, the little slave device you were carrying around in your pocket is giving your location data at all times to the big tech companies that we know on the record are collaborating and coordinating with the U.S. government in all sorts of programs above board and under the table, like the PRISM program, to give that data to the government so it can track your movements, only for the sake of public health, of course. Only because there's a pandemic spreading, so we need to know exactly where you've been, who you're talking to, how far apart you are keeping from those people, whether you're complying with isolation orders, and all of that can be done electronically, technologically, by the thing that you yourself are carrying around with you at all times of your own free will. You're doing this of your own free will. There's no government authority being imposed upon you, right, citizen? This isn't martial law. And of course, again, this is not just the United States. It is happening this way all throughout.
Thank you for watching. Boom.